About a year ago, I don't remember exactly what date, I got the privilege of speaking at senior high camp in Oregon, at Camp White Branch, McKenzie Bridge, up in the mountains, beautiful place. And actually just got called to see if we'd do it again this year, but said, no, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it happen this year. But 2 years in a row, getting to go out and be with these young people, it was pretty amazing. Just the experience with them, the experience together. And it's just one of those places where when you go, there's just something about it. You're in nature. I mean, truly in nature. You don't even have access to Wi-Fi, the phone, all that kind of stuff. It was where I did discover that our phones have an ability to connect with the satellite at certain times as it comes across, maybe because of where we are. Like it's that remote out there. And both years that I've got to go out there have been amazing experiences. And almost a year ago, I think it was in June, July, whenever I was out there, I had that experience again, and I was riding on a high. Things were good. I was looking forward to coming back here. Came back quicker than maybe wanted to because it was our day of the parade with the fair and everything else going on. And everything was going good until the flight home. And on the flight home between Portland and Denver, they made the announcement that there was weather in Denver, and it's Denver. So there's weather in Denver, and it's an airport in Denver. So they were going to reroute us. And I was trying to think this morning what town they rerouted us to, but they told us the name of it, and I'd never heard of it. In fact, most of the people on the plane, when they said we were going, was like, where's that? And I think it was somewhere else in Colorado, but I'm not sure. Like it was just somewhere. It was getting dark. They rerouted us, and they landed us in what looked like, once we landed, just a small town. Like it looked like one of those little airports. And they told us, hey, there's a situation here. We're also running into flight attendant time limits. So if we don't get back up in the air in a certain amount of time, we may be here longer because our flight attendant time runs out. They can't work any longer. You're welcome to get off the plane. You're welcome to deboard and walk around, but you may not make it back on, which is kind of a weird announcement because you're in the middle of nowhere and like, who's going to do that? And so we ended up on this plane for over a couple hours, which is wonderful for a claustrophobic like me to be stuck in the middle of someplace I don't know with little choice on what to do on this plane. But when I was complaining to myself, I was amazed at the couple with the little baby behind me going, it could be so much worse, as they're stuck on there in this moment. And we sat on there for a while, and it got frustrating, and I texted with Leanne the update because she was going to be picking me up in Hayes. I was supposed to get that connection and get back home, and it became very apparent as you were watching the times and watching the flights, which we have the ability to do, that we were going to be maybe not making that connecting flight. And eventually it got to a point where it took long enough that you knew we're not going to make that connecting flight. But they made the announcement that we are getting up in the air, we're going to go. We found somebody because we did run into the flight attendant problem. So the ones that we had to get off. Of course, that just so happened because of all the reroutes, there was another crew there that had time so they could get back on and they could take us the rest of the way home. And we got going, and I was watching that thing so close all the way to see if I was going to make this connecting flight and let her know. And all of a sudden it showed that the connecting flight that I was supposed to be on got in the air and took off. So I knew it wasn't happening. So we got to Denver, and I checked some luggage on the plane. We got to Denver. I had my bag, my book bag. That's all I had with me. And started the process of figuring out, what do you do now? There was even conversation of renting a car or something, but the other thing that happened was the person that gave me the ride from the camp to the airport, I left my glasses in their car. So I couldn't see, and it was dark. I'm like, I can't even really rent a car because I can't see to drive home. And that would be a very expensive Uber trip and awkward for everybody involved to ride with somebody you don't know. So kind of settled in, I'm not making a home tonight. So we went through again the process of rebooking a plane, and because we're flying in days, they only had one flight, and that was the next night, late at night, the same one that I was supposed to catch. So I was going to be stuck in Denver for at least a day. So the next thing we went through after a couple hours of dealing with that, going through lines, was going to get our bags. Got to the place where all the bags were supposed to come out, and it was a mess because of all these people that had been rerouted and were upset and asking questions. And understandably, the people in charge of that were getting irritated, so they were not responding with love and kindness and compassion to those that were asking questions either. And finally, somebody walked out and said, listen, if you're staying here tonight, you can get your bag. If you are not getting your bag tonight. If this is it, sorry, I've said it wrong. If this is your final destination, you can get your bag. If it is not, and you're on a connecting flight, you are not getting your bag tonight. The earliest you can look at it is tomorrow morning again. Again, there was a lot of frustration, a lot of words, a lot of stuff going on, but you finally settled with the reality that we're not getting our bags. This isn't going to happen. So the next thing you do is start looking for a hotel. Well, guess what's not available because all of a sudden. Eventually found a hotel about 25 minutes away, got an Uber driver, and I got there. And I remember about 2 or 3 in the morning finally getting into the hotel and going, okay, I need to brush my teeth. Oh. I need to put my pajamas on. Oh. Finally came to a point where like, I've got nothing. Like I've got what is on my back and what is in my bag. I got nothing. And at first I was very frustrated because you're used to having all the stuff that you have to take care of you. But after a while, I actually went, you know what? It's kind of nice. What else am I going to do? I'll just go to bed and get some rest. Because there was nothing else there to distract me. The next morning I did remember the hotels will give you a free toothbrush. They're pretty cheap toothbrushes if you've ever tried one. I think it cleaned my teeth, but there's not much to them. But they will give you a toothbrush. They'll give you some of those things if you're in that situation. And I was able to get that. But the next morning I got up and I'm like, okay, I got till like, my flight didn't leave till after 10. I'm like, what am I going to do? I got this time. I'm like, I guess, you know what? I have my Bible. I have nowhere to go. I have nothing like on me. So I'll chill. And I went down and I got the continental breakfast and I just read for a while until my time limit came up to have to check out of the hotel. And I thought, now what do I do? Well, I did realize that probably some clean socks and underwear would not be a bad thing. And I looked outside and what do you know, I'm right next to like an outdoor shopping mall area. So I went to every man's favorite place and hit up Target and found some cheap underwear and socks. Came back, they let me keep my bag there, and I just walked around. And I truly walked around with just a backpack and the 2 things that I'd bought kind of in my hand until I got and changed those. And truthfully, enjoyed the fact that I couldn't do anything else. Just enjoyed the fact that you know what, I mean, obviously there was times going through my head like, man, they're running the well, and it's one of our busiest days of the year, but there's nothing I can do. Or, man, I don't have to be pulling my luggage along and there's nothing I can do. And I finally came to a point where it actually hit me, you know, it's kind of nice not to have all my bags and clutter and everything with me. And it turned into being, whether I wanted it to be or not, one of the most relaxing days I experienced in a while because there was nothing else to do but just say, okay, and chill and relax. And I think about that often when I think about what we talked about last week with simplifying so that we can step back and we can sit with God. I don't think we recognize how much our stuff, whether it be material, mental, schedule, emotional, all this kind of stuff, really does weigh us down and keep us from really just experiencing just even authenticity. I don't think we realize that until it's all gone. And there is something freeing about that. And so as we seek to follow Him, it's important, as I shared on last week, that we continue to recognize the power and the benefit of the ancient practices of simplicity and of stepping back and slowing down, of simplifying our stuff, whether it be physical, emotional, and mental. I know it's so hard for us to hear because we're trained so differently that we're supposed to have it all and get it all, that we don't really recognize how powerful and freeing it is when it's gone. then we don't have to spend all of our time thinking about it, dealing with it, keeping it up, worrying about it, all that kind of stuff, or when we're gone, letting somebody else go through it. There's something about that, of simplifying our stuff so we can step back and sit with Him. So I want to share that with you again to kind of tie into last week. Because in a culture that emphasizes doing and accomplishing, it's hard for us to comprehend this idea of simplifying and stepping back. But it's important. And it's not just so we can sit back and be lazy and twiddle our thumbs. It's so that we can apply other practices in our walk with Him, especially the one that I want to talk about today. It more sets us up with the opportunity and the freedom to communicate with Him, to talk about things to Him, to talk together with Him, or to do what we call pray. The truth is, when you read many of these that really look into this and share this and make this important, one of the number one things that they say keeps us from praying. I'm going to go through another list of why we struggle in a minute, but one of the number one things that keeps us from actually doing this very basic thing that God so desires in His relationship with us, which is talk with Him, is our overabundance. Our stuff that keeps us so busy and distracted. The number one thing they say that usually goes out the window is just our simple communication with Him. At the risk of oversimplifying this a little bit, if we are too busy and we are too complicated and we are too cluttered to talk with Him, it's really hard to follow Him. And when we ask at the very beginning, who do you follow? Because we all follow something or someone. If we say it's Him, how do we do that? We have so much that's distracting us. Charles Swindoll, the pastor, I love when he says, when you're too busy, prayer gets squeezed out of the schedule. And that's important for us to recognize that. All throughout Scripture, what we see is that people who took seriously their walk with Him made it an emphasis to talk together with Him, to pray, to meet with Him, to connect with Him, to communicate with Him. And one of those examples is found in Moses, and there's a particular line and a particular moment that's recorded in Moses' life that I think really paints a picture of what he desires and what is available even to us today. So in Exodus 33, that was the section I asked you to go to. I just want to look at this little section together. And I want to tell you, this is after God has freed the Israelites from Egypt. He's gone through the crazy, amazing, miraculous way of freeing them out of bondage, out of the slavery that they were in, leading them to a promised land, which they as human beings continued to make very difficult because of just, humans are humans. And this is after Moses had gone up on the mountain, had received the 10 Commandments, had come back down because he'd been too long and witnessed the people not being patient enough for it to play out, so they created their own god to worship with a golden calf, which if you read that story again, it's almost funny how ridiculous it is when he comes down, because when they were saying, this guy's been gone too long, like, we need to do something, they're going to Aaron, who's supposed to be the right-hand man. He's like, give me all your jewelry, give me all your gold, and he makes this golden calf out of it. But when Moses comes down and asks what's going on, read it again. Aaron's answer is funny. He's like, yeah, they basically got impatient, so they gave me all this gold, and I threw it in the fire, and this calf came out. And what a dumb, really when you read it, you're just like, did he really just say that? But all this has happened, and so Moses is just dealing with this, and one of the things he often does when he's dealing with this in his role as the one that was called to lead these people out was he would often communicate with God in many different ways. He would bargain with God. He would change what God wanted to do. He'd change his mind on behalf of the people because he still had compassion for them. But one of the number one things he would often do is communicate and talk to God. And so in chapter 33, starting in verse 7, it says this. It said, Moses used to take a tent and pitch it outside the camp some distance away, calling it the tent of meeting with God. Anyone inquiring of the Lord would go to the tent of meeting outside the camp. And whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people rose and stood at the entrances to their tents. watching Moses until he entered the tent. As Moses went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and stay at the entrance while the Lord spoke with Moses. And whenever the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance to the tent, they all stood and worshiped, each at the entrance to their own tent. And here's a big line. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one who speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. That line in there is so powerful. In the midst of these conversations with this tent of meeting, it says Moses would go there and the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. This is an idiom, guys, not an idiot, an idiom. When you read just a little bit later, you'd see it other times, this was not a literal thing where they would stand face to face and talk. Because as you read even just a little bit later, Moses asked to see his face, and God says, you can't, or you would die. But what it's trying to imply here is that they would be speaking intimately. That they would actually be standing there intimately having a conversation. Moses spoke with God like he's familiar with him, like a man would speak to a friend. Speaking to him as one who speaks to a friend. That's how he would talk to him. He would still treat him as God. He would still understand, like I said, what would come up later, that he could not actually see his face. He would still have that respect. He would still understand the holiness of him, the set-apartness of him, the awe of him, the respect that comes with him, but he would also know that he could still communicate with him intimately. When it says he speaks to him like a friend, he wasn't walking up to God like, hey, bro, what's up? Like, he's not doing that. He's not being disrespectful. He's not like just treating like this is just some little thing with the big God of the universe. It's not what he's doing here. He's still honored and he still respected him. He was just so comfortable doing it, he would do it as though he were talking to a friend. And you know what Moses was doing here? He was doing what we all have the privilege of doing today. He was communicating with them. He was what we call praying. I mentioned Swindoll earlier. He says this. He says, put succinctly, prayer is communicating with God. That's what Moses was doing here. And that's why I love this line, because this is something we all have the opportunity as we follow him and walk with him to do even today. And it's just as real as it is with Moses. I think sometimes we read it and we're like, well, he got to stand there in front of him. No. We can't see his face either. We don't experience all that the way we think there. Again, it's an idiom. It's just a way of saying he would stand there and talk to him as though they were familiar with each other, like we would those close to us. And he says, that's what I want to do with you today. And here's the cool part. When Moses had these times with God, he discovered what we all can discover through prayer. He discovered that prayer changes. Read a story. When he would have these conversations of God, he would discover that those conversations would lead to change. It would lead to change in God and his decisions. The decisions that he was going to make. He would tell Moses, I'm going to do this to the Israelites. And Moses would talk to him and he would plead with him and he would share with them, say, no, God, don't do that. Don't do that to him. And God would change his mind. He would change the course. It's weird to us to think that it can change God's mind, but that is what would happen. And he wasn't the only one throughout Scripture that ever changed the mind of God through conversation. Think of the story of Lot. When God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, in the end, it still came there because God was making it a point, but he was having a conversation with Lot, allowing Lot to bargain with him. Because that's partly what it can do. It changes others and it changes their circumstances when we communicate with God on the behalf of somebody else. That's what they call intercessory prayer. Because sometimes the reality is just that somebody is in such a place, they can't have that communication on their own. They just can't physically do that. Because they're so in a place that whether it's emotionally or mentally or just in belief, they can't. So we come on behalf of them and say, God, help them. walk with them, and it changes circumstances for them. But most importantly, it changes me. It changes us when we have that conversation, our circumstances, but even more than that, our formation in who we are. John Ortberg writes, the Bible's teaching on prayer leads overwhelmingly to one conclusion. Prayer changes things. And as we walk with him, that's why he says, this is one of those practices I want you to do. Communicate with me. Talk to me. Pray with me. Richard Foster says to pray is to change. But I get it. It's hard. I mean, it sounds like it should be so easy like it was for Moses, but it's not. It's hard. You can think of all the excuses. Part of me wants to have you turn around and share with the people around you why it's hard for you. But see if any of these fit. It's hard because it feels weird. When you really stop and think about it, it feels weird. At worst, it feels like I'm talking to nobody. Like if you were to walk by somebody, if Cindy's taking a walk down the street and I walk by and I see her talking out loud and there's nobody there, I'm going to be like, Cindy has finally lost it. It's gone. Because it looks weird to just be talking to somebody that's not in the room. At worst, that's what it feels like, that there's nobody there. At best, it feels like I'm talking to someone out there somewhere. I don't know if you've heard the commercial on the radio, and I think it's for a podcast and sound and like whatever, because they say their whole thing is like, sometimes you feel like you're just speaking into the void. And that goes to my mind because sometimes I feel like that's what we're doing. We're talking to God that's on the edge of the universe, dealing with all the stuff, and so it's weird to talk to him because he's not even really paying attention. He's out in the void somewhere. So it's weird and it makes it hard. Or it's hard for us because we say, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to pray. And even though somebody might say it's easy, just talk to him, we're still like, but I don't really know how. The disciples struggle with the same thing. That's why they came to Jesus at one point and said, teach us how to pray. Because it's human to say it's hard, I don't know how. And partly why it's hard and don't know how is because you say, I don't know what to talk about or what I'm allowed to talk about. In fact, it's hard because I don't think God cares to hear from me when he has so much bigger stuff, other bigger stuff going on. In fact, I was talking to somebody just not long ago that was going through some tough stuff, and they said they've been praying. They said, but it's come to the point like that they're just like, he's got a lot more busy stuff to deal with than my struggles. And it's hard to keep praying. Because truthfully, we begin to feel that. We can pray about this thing that's so difficult for us or have this conversation or just say, God, I just want to talk to you. But when you start reading what's going on or hearing in the news, you're like, he's got a lot bigger things to deal with that people are praying about. And it makes it hard. Or, here's a big one for me that makes it hard to pray, is that whenever I decide I'm going to finally sit down and really do it, you know what I do? I get distracted. Ironically, it's a lot because of all that clutter that I was talking about going on in my mind for all the things that need to happen in my schedule and everything else. But it's hard to pray because when you finally take the time to do it, it's like that's when the door opens to all the distractions. I like what Henry Nouwen once said. When we go to pray, he says, thoughts jump around in our minds like monkeys jumping around on banana trees. Can anybody relate to that? Or John Ortberg says, something about praying often seems to push my mind into a kind of spiritual attention deficit disorder. And we go, God, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to talk with you and I want to tell you about this thing. Oh, Jan needs me to do that. And then, God, I want this. Oh, shoot, I forgot to write that down. And then it's like the silence or something. We're like, man, I can't do this. It's hard. Or we just think it's too complicated and takes too much time. And at the same time, it just feels like a waste of time. Got work to do. It's not really worth it. I'm better off trying to do it myself. So I get it. It's hard. Just in the way things have been set up. But all that being the case, it begs the question, is it worth it? Like, why would he want us to do it? Is it worth the practice? Is this practice really have a point? Is it important? And so before we go today, I want to share with you why it's so important to God. I don't know, I'm not even going to claim to know all the mysteries of prayer. I'm one of those guys at times goes like, why do I need to say something to him for that to make a difference for somebody else? Why do I need to bring it up? And I don't know all those answers. Everything's spiritual before it's material and physical. I have that, no doubt. Paul is very clear on that. The battle we fight is not a physical one, it's a spiritual one. There's another war and battle and world going on all around us that we don't know. And for whatever reason, in the process, one of the biggest weapons God's given us is this thing of prayer and communicating with Him. But on a practical basis, as we seek to walk with Him and learn this more and grow with Him and become more like Him, there are very real reasons why He wants us to do this with Him. In fact, there's some promises that He makes. And we read about it through those that followed Him. One of the promises He makes when we do this is He's going to give us personal attention. He will truly pay personal attention to our prayers. John writes this. Let me hit the right button. This is the confidence we have in approaching God. That if we ask anything according to His will, what are those three words? He hears us. I think back to that conversation, why would He really pay attention? One of the things He promises is that when we stop to talk to Him, He stops to listen to us. And if we ask a question and want an answer, He's going to share it in some way, form, or fashion. One author says, all of heaven stops. So the prayers of the saints, and he's referring to this moment in Revelation where it says our prayers are like incense going into heaven. And so speaking of that moment, he says all of heaven stops. So the prayers of the saints, your prayers and mine, every one of them can rise before God. They are heard. They matter. Prayers of real human beings like you and me interrupt heaven. Because God so badly wants His communication with us, He will give attention to it. God is never too busy, Swindoll says, never sleeps, never has His mind so occupied with running the universe that He will not hear you. One of the promises He gives is that He will pay attention. He also promises a provision that is genuinely needed will be given. John goes on to finish this by saying, and if we know that He hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have what we asked of Him. Now, there's one thing in here that people get stuck on. What does it say at the very beginning? If we ask according to what? So if you're just asking for the bigger car because you want it, that may not be His will. That's where people get hung up on this. No, He doesn't provide because you're asking for something dumb. You're asking for something that is not in His will. Maybe if He says, okay, that's going to help continue to seek first the kingdom. Or maybe, and there's times where He blesses us and gives us gifts that are greater than we can ever imagine. But sometimes we're asking out of selfish motivation. We're asking because it's about me and not Him and not His kingdom. So at the beginning, He said, when you ask according to my will, He pays attention, but He also provides what we need. We also sometimes think we know when we're asking that that's what we need. He's like, no, that's not actually what you need, but I will give you what you need. In fact, in another section, He's talking about earthly fathers who are evil. When their kids ask for gifts, how much do they give to them? We know that we give more than we may even want to. He's like, so how much more do you think your Father in heaven is going to give you? He promises that when we stop and talk to Him about it, He's going to provide the provision that we need. But honestly, even better, He's going to provide a peace that is unexplainable, which is so much what we long for. That's why Paul writes, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. What is that called? Praying. Communicating with Him, talking to Him about it, and this is what the promise is. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. God says, I promise that I will hear you, and I will provide what you need, but more than anything, you know what I'm going to give you? peace. Because sometimes my provision won't happen for a while, whatever it is, because you think you need this, but I know you need this, but we're talking about this, and as this relationship grows and you begin to understand me more through this communication that we have, and we begin to learn each other, and we begin to hear each other and share with each other, I'm going to provide the peace that passes all understanding. In other words, it's unexplainable. No preacher can get up and tell you how it happens because nobody knows. It's unexplainable. It passes understanding. I'm going to give you that. Whether it's for your circumstance or to hold you over until you see. I'm going to give you that. And in the meantime, through this whole process, the promise that we're going to really get to experience is His formation in our life. We're going to get to experience more understanding of His heart, in His mind, in His soul. Julian of Norwich once claimed, prayer unites the soul with God. Again, Ortberg says, in addition to all the other work that gets done through prayer, perhaps the greatest work of all is knitting of the human heart together with the heart of God. Because prayer is the central avenue God uses to transform us. And the closer we come to the heartbeat of God, the more we see our need and the more we desire to be conformed to Christ. We begin to see things from His point of view. So how then? It's hard, but I'm going to believe these promises. So how can I live out this practice? Again, there's so many ways. And we could spend months just on this topic, but I don't want to overcomplicate it. And I don't have all the answers, so I don't want to pretend like I do. But there are a few things that we can start today in that communication, because He wants that communication to start today. To start experiencing these promises and break through the barriers that make it hard. Prayer is something we learn. Communicating with Him is someone, and it's not something that we just become an expert at overnight. It doesn't work that way. It's a learned thing all the time because it's a living relationship. But there are certain things that we can put into our life to practice this practice. Beginning with the idea of being intentional about it. So often, if we're going to say, okay, I want to grow in this, I want to connect more, I want this to happen, it begins with making an intentional decision. We cannot walk out of here today and be like, man, that sounds good, I need to do that, that's really good, and then just keep going on living life. Because you know what's going to win is life. And a Sunday or two or three or four, maybe Annabelle is going to speak on this again next week. She's going to come and share something and be like, oh man, I didn't do that. Sometimes we need to be intentional. Schedule a time and a place that we're going to have that first conversation. We can even write it in on our calendar, because again, if you don't put it on the calendar overtakes you. But write it on the calendar. If it's 5 minutes, say, God, I'm going to meet with you. I'm going to grab my cup of coffee. It's probably cold now. And I'm going to meet with you. I just want to talk with you. And we find a time and a place that eventually becomes a sacred spot for us. It's like having a favorite restaurant to go to with your spouse, or a favorite place to go meet up and study. Like it becomes that time. It's being that intentional about it. Find that place, but also that time. Find that time that you know that you're going to be the most aware. Some of you in this room, we often are always taught the best thing to do is do it first thing in the morning, and I believe that. I believe in the statistics that say the first thing that's on our mind, the first thing we read, the first thing we look at is what's going to guide us through the day. So if we first pull up the news and that's the first thing we look at, or we first pull up work, what's going to guide us all day? Worry, anxiety, and get it done. If we pull up our scripture and we look at God and who He is, the first thing going to be on our mind that's going to keep coming back to is, well, I got God, when all that other stuff comes. That's not Bible, that's not me, that's just psychology that they're understanding. The first 5 minutes that we put in our brains runs so much of our day. And so I'm all for that. But the truth is, for some of you trying to talk to Him first thing in the morning, you may be such a grouch that He doesn't even want to talk to you. That may not be your time of the day. So determine what's the best time for me to actually be able to communicate, especially when the monkeys start jumping. And that's going on. Maybe it's a lunch break. Say, God, I'm going to just have lunch with you. I'm not going to go home, turn on the TV to this. You and I are going to talk. But be intentional about setting a time and a place. Like an author says, like any other demanding activity, prayer requires a certain level of preparation, but it's worth it because prayer is an investment. And anything that's an investment, we prepare. The time you dedicate to prayer isn't lost. It's going to return dividends far greater than what a few moments spent on a task ever could. So maybe schedule that time in. And if you're one of those that's like, man, I just can't picture him there. I can't see it. I don't know how to talk to this thing that's there. Here's another idea. If you're one that has a hard time with that, I can't see him, so it feels like I'm talking to air thing. Make the moment, I'm going to make up a word, imaginable. Is that a word? It's not according to word because it's underlined in red like I spelled wrong. Make it an imaginable moment. In other words, imagine he's there, like a child would. I know one person that literally pulls up a chair and sits it next to them. I imagine that a little bit more like Moses, going the tent to meet face to face. Imagination is a powerful tool in the work of prayer, and it often opens up the door to faith. And even imagine in that moment the God, the aspect, the characteristic, the piece of God that you need to talk to. Do you need the Father in that moment? Then imagine the Father is sitting with you. Do you need the ruler of the universe in that moment? Then imagine you're talking to the ruler. But allow imagination to not be a barrier, but a way to connect. And if you have that sacred space and that sacred time, I know some people have a prayer closet. Some people will just leave the chair in the closet all the time. It's a little weird when they leave them, like, so you just left God in the closet while you went the rest of the way, huh? But you know what I mean? Imagine it. Make it imaginable. And then finally, just make it natural. Do it from where you are. Don't make it some big, got to change the words to King James, got to make it sound great, got to talk to him like I would not talk to anybody else. Just talk to him like you do anybody else. God, this stinks. God, this is hard. God, I'm upset with you. God, that was so fun. Did you see what happened last night? God, whatever it may be, speak from where you are, both in the time of the day. If you're at work and you're like, man, I got to talk to God, then talk to God. Just like you would pick up a phone and text or call a friend. Talk to him. If you're rolling along through there and then something comes up, then say, God, listen, I'm telling you, the one thing that, there's a few things with my grandpa that I always remember, and one of them is his ability to just make you think someone else was in the car with you or on the job with you. You would just be going along, and all of a sudden he's like, okay, God, I need you to tell me how to do whatever. And I'm like looking around like, where is he? Like sitting in the vehicle. Or try and fix a tire and you can't get it done. God, show me how to do this. I remember as a high schooler going, sounds good, Grandpa, but he ain't showing you how to do this because he ain't here. It would always end up working out somehow in some way at some time, but it was so natural to talk from where he was at because that's what it is. I want a friend. But also talk from where you are. If that spiritual attention deficit disorder is going on, then don't use that as a barrier. Obviously, if it's on your mind, it's important, so use it as a stepping stone. If Jan's coming to mind, say, God, help Jan today, by the way. Help me understand why she's on my mind. Use it as a stepping stone. Just be natural. And start from where you are. I promise that if we become people who make it intentional, we allow our imaginations to be a part of it, and just make it natural, we'll be on our way to practicing this thing that he desires with us so much. And again, there's so much more that we could share and talk about. I encourage you to do that. Talk to others about it. But also talk to him, because that's what he wants to do as you walk with him and as you follow him. And I don't want to overcomplicate it, just like we would in any other important relationship. Just talk to him. You know, I noticed something at the end of this week, especially after Thursday. I talked a lot this week. And I don't mean in the Jared talks a lot kind of talk a lot. I mean in conversations. Whether I initiated it or somebody initiated with me, I was looking back in my week, and especially after Thursday, from the beginning to the end, whether I planned it or whether it was just something that popped in, it felt like I was in a conversation after conversation after conversation after conversation. And we had a really long meeting. Beryl can attest to that. Preparing for things that are coming up, and it was conversation. And I realized when I went home, it was like, I talked a lot today to a lot of different people about things that we thought were important or about conversations we thought needed to take place, because those people in my life, in one way or another, are important to me. You know what I did, for lack of a better word? I prayed to them. Why can't I just do it with him? Why can't I do the same thing that I do on a regular basis every day and talk to him in the same way? Why is it that the one who's the most important relationship in my life, or at least so I claim, is the one that I talk to the least? And then I wonder why I have a hard time following at times. I have a hard time becoming more like him. Maybe it's because I just don't talk to him. But his desire is to talk to you. That's what relationship is, and that's what this is. A relationship. So as we go into spring break, even though it does not feel like spring break right now, but that's called Kansas. We get it every year. Something weird happens on spring break. At least it's not snowing yet. I don't know what's going to happen in an hour. But as we go into this, and some get this opportunity to have a change in their schedule, one thing I'd like to encourage you is try this. If it's not already happening, speak to him face to face as a man would with a friend. Follow the example of Moses. Because here's the other thing. We look at Moses going and meeting with him and doing that, and we forget that God came and met with him because he wants that. And he wants it with you. And he'll say, from here, it's how you can follow me. That is why Paul would write these words that I'm going to leave you with and challenge you with and encourage you with today. Rejoice always. Pray. Talk. Communicate with him continually. Give thanks in all circumstances. Why? Because he desires it for you. This is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. God, I pray, I ask, as I talk to you and communicate with you, that you would help us in this, because again, this is something we all get the privilege of doing. God, help us to understand if there's maybe some other things that make it hard and some other barriers that keep that from happening. God, deal with that with each person and where they're at. But help us to understand that this is a privilege we all have. Not just Moses, not just those saints that we talk about, or these what we look at as elite spiritual people to have it all together, which deep down we know don't. Not just for those that are pastors and priests and everything else, but each of us get this opportunity and your call to follow you, to communicate with you. And God, help us to understand on the most practical level that it's so hard to follow you and to walk with you if we're not even talking to you. But on the flip side, to know that as we do, we're naturally going to get that privilege too. So God, a word that just gets thrown around so much in the church, even a word that we use just to let somebody know we're thinking of, all that kind of stuff, help us to take serious this week, this moment, this day, and just communicate with you, talk to you, and practice this practice, praying. Thank you for the gift, and thank you for being so desiring to do this with us and to meet with us because of your care for us, even though we sang, who are we, that we can. God, as we go home today, pray for safety, just getting back to our places. And God, for those that are on spring break and with their children and different opportunities, God, I pray that you would just give them something special to experience. memories to make until you bring us back to this place again next week and the weeks to follow. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a great day. Come back next week for Annabelle, who doesn't know what she's talking about. She's a little nervous. Hey, here's an idea. Pray for her. All right? So she shares with you next week.